You know, when you write a book, one of the most frequent questions people ask is, why did you write the book? For us, the answer is really very simple. How could we not? The Nielsen company has a privileged view into 105 countries all around the world. It is a view around the world and within 105 countries. We see manufacturers, retailers, and we see the media. And we have a global perspective. It is a privileged perspective and one we felt compelled to share. We're going to talk a lot about what's in the book. And more importantly, we're going to share just a few observations. But if there's one thing we'd ask you to take away, it is that there are three macroeconomic factors which everybody in this room must become comfortable with and master. Number one, we are in a period of long-term oversupply. China, Turkey, Africa coming on board, technology. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a period of long-term oversupply. And in the developed nations, we will have flat to contracting demand for the next 4 to 5 years. And for those of us who wake up every morning, turn on our PCs, and see what the next Groupon offer is or what's going on around the world, we do know that the way that demand is formed, aggregated, and satisfied has changed forevermore. Dave and I came together from very different backgrounds. Dave was the vice chairman of General Electric, where they virtually perfected the supply chain. But because of his own intellectual curiosity and that of Jack Welch's, they began to explore and answer the question, if we're masters of supply, what happens if we also become masters of demand? And so, at General Electric, they began to think about where is the profitable demand for each of our businesses. I come from a very different place. 10 years ago, our chief economist, Venki Bala, who's sitting in the audience, Dr. Venki Bala, my partner Jason Green, and I wrote a book. And the book is titled The New Law of Demand and Supply, reversing what Adam Smith said. Because we believe that if Adam Smith were writing the book 10 years ago versus 210 years ago, he would have first recognized the primacy of demand. 10 years ago, we said that globalization was going to be important. 10 years ago, we said that with the onset of even greater technology, China and India, we would begin a long-term chronic oversupply. 10 years ago, we said this new thing called the internet will change consumers, it will change competition, it will change companies, it will change communication. 10 years ago, we said consumers would have perfect choice 24/7. When Dave and I met, despite our different backgrounds, it turned out that we had a single aligned point of view. And we concluded, therefore, that the best way to communicate what we feel so deeply, so strongly, so everlastingly, and so compellingly is that we wanted to ring the bells of change. And recognizing that the constant companion of change is opportunity. So that for every one of you sitting here tonight, there has never been a better time to have your voices be clear, to lead your companies amidst this sea of change. Change is an opportunity. Companies who have seized the change despite the difficulty in developed nations are today prospering as they never have before. Because while other companies lament the darkness, these companies have seen the light in the way. Let me give you some idea of the diversity of these companies, who are every single quarter and every single year setting records in revenue, profit, margin, free cash flow, and total shareholder return. These companies are as diverse as Hershey, Best Buy, IBM, Sam's Club, Hewlett-Packard, McDonald's, Anheuser-Busch, IBM. The only thing that brings those companies together is that they recognize that demand is the most precious commodity in this economy. And while the next 4 to 5 years will continue to be challenging, we continue to believe that there has never been a better time to introduce new strategies, new competencies, new business models. Let me be clear about the future. Today, America is 6% of the world's population, and we're 26% of GDP. This is not a zero-sum game. It is not us versus China and India, because in fact, the macroeconomics are that Turkey and Malaysia and China and India and Brazil are all going to begin to grow their demand dramatically. In the last decade, 23 million people in Brazil moved from the lower class to the middle class. I just came back from Brazil 2 days ago. It's equally exciting as is China. But before we get to the golden age of America's business, when we will almost surely be less than 26% of GDP, but we will have a much larger pie from which to carve our slice of 22 or 23% GDP. But in that interim period before the golden age begins, our companies have to be poised. And before I get to the formulas that we share with you in the book, I want to share a couple of thoughts about the three macro factors. One, oversupply. The reality is that Turkey, Brazil, China, India, and Africa, which will have a middle class larger than India in the next 7 years, and the role of technology are all creating more supply than there can possibly be demand to absorb it. In the United States, our factory capacity is precisely at the same level as it was in 1983. Will demand be flat to contracting? You bet. Disaggregate unemployment. 4.8% for people who've got college degrees, 18.3% for people with less than a high school education. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have just an unemployment problem, we have a re-education opportunity. The only households that are increasing their shopping trips and are increasing their spend per trip are households over $100,000. Everybody else is negative. And lastly, government transfers, things like food stamps. They are up 70% from the beginning of 2008 until today. Why does Bernanke not want to change what he's doing? Because he recognizes that if he were to pull back the 70% growth in government transfer, we would be in a questionable and difficult position. And finally, we only need to look at the headlines in Egypt and all around the world to recognize that demand is being formed, aggregated, and satisfied in ways that were never thought possible just a few short years ago. For all of us in this room, there are sea changes, and as I was writing this, I recognized changes in the seas. Changes every day in consumers, in competition, in countries, in companies, in categories, in communication, in competitors, and in careers. There is a sea change taking place. You pick your sea. My father used to have a sign on his desk, and it said, "If you maintain your composure while everyone around you is losing theirs, maybe you just don't understand the situation." In Dave's and my view, it is precisely that the case has become clear. The way your companies will win in the future is very different than the way your companies have won in the past. Some of you will sit there and say, "We've got it knocked. Our company will continue to win the way in the future the way it won in the past." Let me remind you, doesn't Sears wish they were Walmart? Doesn't Keds wish they were Nike? Doesn't Zenith wish it was Sony? Doesn't Motorola wish it was Apple? Doesn't Encyclopedia Britannica wish it were Google? Doesn't MGM wish it were Netflix? And don't we all wish we had a lot of stock in Groupon? As we go forward, we keep the skills that we have, predominantly around the supply chain and the skills we have in marketing. But we have to hone the skills around demand. We are in an era where the most precious commodity is profitable demand. We're in an era when the question we must answer is, I do know many things about the demand of my most profitable consumer that my competitors don't know. We're in an era that demands more of segmentation, not just demography and behavior, but current, latent, and emerging demand, all brought together in a framework of economics, total competitive supply, and opportunity. We're in an era of need states, where brands and products are the what, consumers are the who, and need states are the why. It's how Anheuser-Busch added $250 million of margin by understanding the outdoor refreshment need state, and how McDonald's has reported 20 consecutive quarters of record growth by recognizing the need states that they created at snacks in 24 hours. We live in an era of precision, where Google and our GPS makes precision not an opportunity, but an expectation. Financial services companies today can look with 81% certainty into databases of 18 million consumer households and know with virtual certainty what 81% of those households are carrying around as latent and emerging demand. We are in an era where new demand chains will take their rightful place alongside the last 30 years of supply chain expertise. And to share with you more about the demand chain and what's going to be expected of all of our companies is my friend and co-author, Dave Calhoun.
Good. Thanks, Rick, as always, thank you. I often times feel like when I'm following Rick, he gets to talk about the architecture and I get to talk about the plumbing. But I do want to leave you with a little bit of an impression from a guy who spent a long time as an industrial grunt, and that is a lot of this is plumbing. And my notion of how to succeed in this world ahead, the one that Rick talked about, the one where so much change is on us, the one where we are always in constant oversupply, and we are, at the end of the day, the differences and the changes and the winners are going to be determined based on a lot of the plumbing. How you look at your demand chain. All of you guys work for somebody. All of you work in an institution that has somebody at the top. And I keep asking a question, who do they go to answer questions about the demand chain? I know it's really easy on the supply chain. Who do they go to on the demand chain? And what do they know about the lineup of activities that deliver on the demand chain, ultimately surfacing new ideas and new emerging trends and satisfying those emerging trends? Well, that's what I'd like to talk about for a couple of minutes here. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, I was asked by then a brand new CEO, Jack Welch, to go study what the hell was going on in Japan. And it was, at that time, the Toyota production system and a few other companies that were surrounding Toyota that were also resident in Japan. And they were working on something that we now refer to quite easily as the supply chain. They did it because the forces of globalization were on them. They decided that they could build a product that they could sell anywhere in the world. The problem is they were landlocked. They had a small piece of property on which to build a footprint and service those needs everywhere in the world. So they brought a whole new way of thinking to all those activities and functions that we used to refer to in what is today called a supply chain. So just a couple of thoughts. Our takeaways in studying that company, those companies way back when, and what is it about sort of what was differentiating them and why they were winning so big in the automotive world. First and foremost, they defined an end-to-end process. They didn't call it a supply chain, they called it the Toyota production system. End-to-end, they knew what need they were trying to satisfy, they knew what raw materials they needed to buy, and all they talked about was the workflow in between. Zero references to function. No purchasing discussion, no manufacturing discussion, no manufacturing engineering discussion, none of that kind of stuff. So the notion that it was end-to-end and they had to define it by workflow was a reasonably big deal. Second, they decided to look at that end-to-end process and introduce brand new metrics to it, metrics that had not been in any way, shape, or form developed, much less pervasive anywhere else. First, time, cycle time. Everything had a cycle time applied to it, everything. They took months out of the cycle, then they took weeks, then they took days, and today they work on minutes. But they've never stopped their relentless approach on taking cycle out of that end-to-end process. They delivered metrics like first-time quality. We call it Six Sigma. A lot of people have put words and wrapped nomenclature around it. But at the end of the day, it was just first-time quality applied to any level of work. And then they had one other big metric called waste. And waste was every single activity that didn't put something on the car. Literally, didn't put something on the car. 75 to 80% of everything they did as a company was called waste. And then they went on a relentless effort to reduce it in every way they could. And finally, just from the leadership practice point of view, this was everybody in, all in, from CEO to every one of the direct staff, all the way down the line, understood what the system was and the role they played in perfecting it. And this has gone on for 30 years. It is still going on today with relentless precision. All around, end to end, the delivery of one car at a time. Think about the precision that's built into that whole premise. Ultimately, this is a trend for 35 years delivered productivity and efficiency to the world. It is what allowed us all to capitalize on globalization. There was so much embedded in this. It lifted companies, it lifted countries, standards of living, etc. Today, interesting to me, the guys who Amazon hired to develop the supply chain in their world to meet the needs of their online consumers, all built on leadership traits and people who grew up in that Toyota-based supply chain. It's an amazing, amazing carry forward effect. So now I think about the demand chain, and think about how we refer to the demand chain. I've heard of great marketing companies, great sales companies. Oh, wish I had their distribution. Boy, can they sell. Everybody describes good companies in the demand world by function, by some single skill set, maybe a wildly successful ad campaign. And while it's successful, there's sort of the hit of the parade. I rarely find anyone who talks about it as an end-to-end process. Surfacing the idea, prosecuting the idea, synchronizing all activities, thinking about it in that same time-based measure. You rarely run into that. And yet, that is what I believe we're at the forefront of today. I think that kind of thinking is going to occupy CEOs everywhere. I think they're going to find new ways to put it all together. They're going to start using time as the single most important metric to prosecute ideas and to deliver on big aggregated demand. And I think it's going to be the way of the world. And when I think about it, and my guess is, knowing everybody in this room and knowing how close you are to all of this stuff, this will make the supply chain look like a walk in the park. Because we see so much inefficiency. If we wanted to find waste across the demand side, I promise you it'd be well in excess of 80%. It has to be. There are too many handoffs, too mmany things to synchronize. It's hard work. The plumbing ultimately has to get fixed and thought about differently. And I believe everybody in this room has a big role to play in that. For me, it's exciting as hell. And the tools and the technology that we have around us today, if we use it the right way and we use it to inform every step of that synchronization, will open opportunity. Nothing will be easy about this. I always ask myself, okay, so if I were Jack and I was back then and I wanted to go find out what in the world's going on in this front, who would I go study? Well, probably not to anyone's surprise, I'd go to Apple. And I'd ask. Now, first thing Steve Jobs would say, what are you talking about? We don't have a demand chain. And yet, I'm pretty sure he and every one of his major operatives are 100% committed to prosecuting the demand chain. I'm just guessing he doesn't get a lot of supply chain reports. I'm just guessing he's not spending an awful lot of time on that one. But when I think about the synchronization of that model today, it blows my mind. He sells expectation. He appeals to one of the great aggregate needs in humanity, organization and simplicity, in one of the real battlefields of society, the internet, and everything that's coming at you, right? What does he satisfy when you see the commercial on television? That simple notion of organizing your life. He uses one-word phrases and the flick of a finger. That's how easy it makes it look. It is so basic a need that he is appealing to. And then the run of applications that come under that whole guise. the way they introduce it, their ability to set expectation. They create scarcity before the product is created. Scarcity reinforces value, reinforces price premium, all the things that our category experts and premium and value analysts tell us how to get, they bake it in before the product's ever developed and finished. And they carry that. What do they do with retail? Well, they decided existing retail wasn't good enough, they'd invent their own. They have a genius bar and geniuses who introduce new users, educate them a little bit, just give them the rough basics, and then they dig in and move forward. But think about how all of this is synchronized. The best part of the whole thing, and in fact, we had a discussion at my lunch table, sunset. They sunset products before most people, within the time frame most people take to introduce a product. Right? Anybody right now feeling lousy about the first iPad they bought? You don't actually feel lousy. You feel good about a company that renews itself every day. And the importance of sunsetting a product is it creates capacity to create the next one. How many of you in the manufacturing world sit on a product today that you know damn well is at the tail end, but how many people are committed to keeping it alive? Committed to keeping it alive. And doesn't it suck the energy? And doesn't it suck the intellectual capacity of the company down? You have less to do the future. Apple has figured out a way to synchronize every part and parcel of this, and no, they don't have a definition and they didn't write a book. But that's what our job is. Our job is to understand what makes it so special. Contrast it. No great forward story is good without a contrast. In the late 90s, who was the big winner in technology? Dell. Dell was at the tail end of perfecting the supply chain, right? Late point identification and configuration. For the first time, you were able to get on your PC, you were able to configure your computer, and it got delivered in 2 days. And it's amazing how good you felt about that. But it was a supply chain strategy. There was no great new definition of demand. They weren't out hunting for that next great need. There was no latent or emerging demand to be satisfied. They simply took every product they thought was close to the personal computer, and they tried to ram it through the same supply chain to give you some notion of late point ID and quick delivery. That wasn't enough. They perfected the end of the supply chain, not the beginning of the demand chain. So the question for all of us is, how do you put this demand chain together? How committed are you? I view our company and the crazy experience that I've had here for 4 years and the future that I look forward to as a bit of a reflection of that expectation. I had a company that serviced all parts of the demand chain, and guess what? Nobody within my world knew each other. We introduced each other to one another 4 years ago. We just recently simplified the way we talk about our company, watch and buy. Why? Because it's easier to integrate. You stop with all the nomenclature issues about sort of who's what and who's doing where, who's the second screen, where's the third screen. It's best available screen. That's all a consumer cares about. Where am I and which one's closest? I'll use it. All of those notions about how to integrate and think about a demand chain holistically, I have faced day in and day out trying to put our company together. I have legacy issues out the yin-yang, and everybody in this room knows them better than I do, right? But it will not stop us from leaning forward and putting them together. Every product that we will introduce will have some form of integration and allow somebody on the user side to put things together that they didn't used to be able to put together. It's taken us too long to get to extended screen, introduce that second screen to our TV panel, but we will, we have. Second quarter, we'll introduce it. We'll have an online campaign rating that we've built with Facebook and we've built with a lot of advertiser input to allow us to directly compare screens. Not because it's one or the other, it's because they work together. And you gotta know them both, and you gotta know how to campaign them together. It's the synchronization of all this effort. It's not the one, this one or that one. And yet, our clients, our industry, all of us, at least half the discussion is about one instead of the other. It's always the trade-off, when in fact, it's the synchronization of all this work. It's the synchronization of all the buy research that we do in our world with all the watch research. It's a higher level order. I know it. Don't get intimidated by it. It's not coming fast. The supply chain didn't come fast. It's going to take us forever. We're going to have to work one company at a time, all with different words. But it is the way it will be prosecuted. I believe the technology world, and in particular social media, unlock it all. Just unlock it all. Connect, buy, and sell in ways that we can't imagine. The ability to prosecute or execute on a new notion of demand that was developed at light speed in social media in aggregated form like nothing we've ever seen. The ability to do that now is like it's never been, and therefore we don't have a luxury to study the trade-offs, to study sort of where it goes. It's just going. Everything about our metrics, measurements, the way we approach our clients in your world and in my world has to be to put it together, reduce the cycles, and think about it holistically. I believe in this, I think, as you can tell, very, very deeply. I believe the opportunity here is bigger than what I ever saw in the supply chain, and I spent 20 years of my life trying to perfect the supply chain. I like everything about the measurement implications of this one. I love fragmentation. I love the fact that we don't operate accounting systems. Those are nice. That's what informs the supply chain. They balance every day. So it's very comfortable. Forms of variation are really easy to find. It's an empty shelf, unfulfilled order, or inventory. Really simple to see. They're visible. Ours are more subtle. The time it takes to get an idea to a product, to a shelf, to a consumer. That's a different set of cycle time. I would argue the costs are much bigger. The implications of going slow on that cycle are much more significant than screwing up on the supply chain. And the fact that you can't see it means that we have more to offer as an information services world, as ability to sort of highlight, reflect, and train management and train leaders on how to respond. The supply chain world today, you get one variation and 50 people are on it and 49 of them know the right answer. In our world, first of all, we have a hard time figuring out what that variation is, and then the next, 50 people in a room, pretty much bet on 50 different ideas, right? And then a battle about which one's the right one. The exercise of judgment in that process is going to be profound and important, and what could be better for us? What could be more uplifting? But we all have to raise our game. We got to stop talking anecdotally and stop talking about specific functions and start talking about the whole. On your own terms, in your own company, at your own pace. But that's the way we have to do it. The next piece of analytical research and insight is really big and it's really important. But I will tell you, compared to making great use of it, prosecuting the idea, put it at the right place at the right time so the right salesperson can take advantage of it, or the right programming operation can take advantage of it, that's far more important. Far more important. And we all have to feel great about that. We got to want to lean into it, and we got to feel great about it. So I know, again, a little too much plumbing for everyone in the room. And my guess is when you go home, you go, oh, shit, how do I do this, right? And yet, this is exactly what we have to do. We have to lean into it in a big way, and we have to educate our leaders, and we have to educate everybody around us that, in fact, there is a big demand chain, and it needs desperately to be defined for us. Otherwise, someone else will define it for us, and we won't like the answer. We won't like the answer. So listen, I appreciate your time. I'm 40 seconds over. Bob, I know I probably have spoiled the Q&A. I really do have a blast at these things, and I know Rick does too, because you guys you know everything going on in this demand chain. And you see these major points of dislocation and opportunity, as I like to call it, more clearly than anyone else. My only hope is that we all can figure out a way to rally around a bigger picture and a bigger discussion that captures the CEO and gets us a seat at that table, because that's what we desperately need to be effective. So I appreciate the time. Thank you.
He talks pretty well for a plumber, don't you think? Yep. So we wrote a book to read, but our deep hope is that we wrote a book that will inspire. What Dave and I believe is that it is the combination of the supply chain and the demand chain that represents the business model of the 21st century. And ladies and gentlemen of the research and information industry, your time and our time is now. There didn't used to be a CTO in the C-suite. There didn't used to be a CIO in the C-suite. But because technology and information were a highway and a vision into the future, they now have a seat at the CEO's table. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your time, this is our time. Clear leadership voices all around the fact that demand is the single most precious commodity. And our vision is that in the very near term, in some, most, or all of your companies at the C-suite, there is a CRO, the Chief Research Officer, who is architecting the future for your companies. Thank you.